We are back for another edition of SJHL Insider. Another busy weekend ahead in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. And as always, our episode of SJHL Insider is presented by our podcast sponsor, SGI, but also among many great sponsors that help us put on our programming on SJHL, that being Chevrolet, Capital Auto Mall, Great Western, Cantera Seeds, RBC, SaskTel, SGU, Direct West, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, Tourism Saskatchewan, and Young's Equipment. Thank you all so much for your support as we put on these great shows each and every week. On today's program, we have, we're hoping, fingers crossed, last time we tried to have Rob Hart on of the Flin Flon Bombers. Technically, it didn't work out. We think we've got the cobwebs all figured out, but to be determined. But we're hoping to be joined by the voice of the Flin Flon Bombers, Rob Hart. We have a few games to recap and much, much more with the turn of the calendar into November as we bring in our co-host, Clark Munroe. Clark, how are we doing today?
Doing great, Jeromy. Looking forward to a big weekend. We got a lot of stuff to talk about throughout the show here today. Should be a good one.
Yeah, and finally a rare Sunday game, but we'll get into that in a bit. And we didn't have any games on Tuesday, but we did have a pair last night, but we can get right into that in our first segment.
Let's do it. Let's kick off the show with the hat trick. There it is. Love it every time. Topic number one, we are going to look back at yesterday's games. There were two games on the docket. Jeromy and I were attending one of them. We had a blast there. So let's have a look at this one.
Yeah, the Flin Flon Bombers picked up a 2-1 win over the Melfort Mustangs to win their fourth game in a row. Flin Flon playing some really good hockey right now. And then the Notre Dame Hounds getting a 5-3 win over the Melville Millionaires to get back in the win column and inch closer to the 500 mark. Let's quickly start with the Flin Flon Melfort game. I think it was an important one, obviously, in the Sherwood division, but Flin Flon winning their fourth in a row. They continue to look very strong right now in the Sherwood division. They now have a 5-point lead, I do believe, on the Larange Ice Wolves for the top spot in the Sherwood division. And, you know, we continue to say with the Melfort Mustangs, an up and down start to this season, and it's tough to get a kind of a read on them so far.
Yeah, a little bit up and down, like you said. Obviously, a good goaltending matchup throughout that one, only a 2-1 score. And I think it was the Bombers Twitter account that tweeted out a gritty win, or we grinded it out, or something along those lines. So that's just how Flin Flon's one of those teams, Jared. I think we've talked about it before. They can win games a bunch of different ways. They have a great blue line. They have great goaltending. They can score on any given night. So they're just showing that they can continue to do that throughout the season.
Yeah, good teams find a way to win, and that's what the Flin Flon Bombers do. I mean, they're off to a great start this season, 12-3, 1-1, and hopefully we can chat with Rob Hart about that, about their great start to the season and some of the great performances they've had. And of course, you alluded to it last night. We were at the Duncan McNeil Arena for the Notre Dame Hounds against the Melville Millionaires. Of course, this was the second meeting of the season between the two teams. Last time they met was at the SJHL Showcase, where the Melville Millionaires picked up a 4-3 win. But last night, it was the Hounds getting a little bit of revenge, winning 5-3. I guess when you look back at last night's game, what did you think of the game?
So, first of all, the thing that jumps out right away is Notre Dame almost doubled Melville in shots. 41-21 was the final count. For Notre Dame. Kelton Pine got peppered, and he, despite giving up some goals there, especially in the second period, Notre Dame came on strong. He had a pretty good outing, kind of carrying his team through some tough stretches where Notre Dame had them hemmed in their end for quite a bit. Melville came on strong. They got the first two goals of the game, and then you were up in the booth with Mr. Jamie Neugebauer in the second period. They got that one goal, and I felt that kind of just sparked the team, and they took off from there, and they ended up scoring 4 goals in that second period. I guess from your perspective up in the booth during that second period, what clicked?
I would say, you know what, I mean, I thought through the first period, Notre Dame was outplaying Melville. Melville, they had one really high-quality scoring opportunity in the first period, and they took advantage of it, and they had a 1-0 lead. And Notre Dame kept, like you mentioned, kind of kept peppering Kelton Pine, and they finally broke through on the power play. And it seemed like that was just what they needed confidence-wise. And as a result, after that goal, they really carried the play in the second period. And I think it was a bit of a heartbreaker, I think, for Melville allowing that fourth goal with 5 seconds left. That always takes the wind out of your sails. A lot of coaches will always say, don't allow a team to score in the first minute and the last minute. And, that was one where I think with all the momentum coming, I'm sure Melville would have liked to have gotten out of that period just down by 1. Mm-hmm. But that last goal in the second period kind of deflated them a bit. But they had a strong third. Melville had a strong third. They got back to within 1, but it was too much. And now as a result, the Notre Dame Hounds picking up a big win. And you know what? I would argue, and maybe this is a hot take, but
buckle up.
I've seen a lot of games so far this year live, and of course a lot of the rest on Hockey TV. But I would say through the first month and a half, the one team that, in my opinion, has improved the most from the start of the season to now is the Notre Dame Hounds.
Absolutely.
I think they are now they're starting to hit their stride. They're getting some solid goaltending. I think their blue line looks rock solid. I think we were talking about that at the beginning of the season. The strength is in their blue line, and now they're getting some contributions up front from other players not named Will Dawson. And Will Dawson had a bit of a goalless streak that Jamie was telling us about going into last night's game, but he breaks that slide, gets 2 goals last night, the fourth goal, and then the empty netter. And now it seems like the Hounds have kind of turned the corner, and they're playing a lot better hockey.
Yeah, well, I guess you mentioned it. Like Antoine St. Ange got a goal last night. Cypress Smith-Davis, one of the coolest names in the league. Cypress, great name. He got a goal, and Jamie Neugebauer was telling me on the broadcast last night. Those are the bottom 6 guys, and they're putting in goals. They're helping out. And it's weird because you mentioned they've been improved lately, and it kind of coincides with them getting Carson Bayless via trade. Since he's gotten there, he's been scoring goals, and he's kind of sparked that lineup a little bit, balanced it out maybe a little bit more, and they looked really strong last night. I will say one shout out. Keep an eye on the highlight of the week this week, because I think it's coming from this game. I don't know if you want to get into it, but it was an impressive night in that regard. So we'll tease you. It's called a teaser in the industry, but I think it was a fun night. I had a great time.
It was a very entertaining hockey game, to say the least. And a lot of times, this year in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, there's been a lot of entertaining games, and that just comes down to the parity in the league. But let's move on to our second point.
Topic number 2 is going to be the first edition of Players of the Month for the SJHL was announced earlier this week. That includes the MVP, the goalie, the defenseman, and the rookie, of course, as we do every week. But this time, it's of the month. And Jeromy, do you want to break that down?
Well, the SGU MVP of the month, I think was a unanimous decision. I think it was an easy one for the crew deciding, and that's Holden Dole of the Battleford North Stars. You have 9 goals, 11 assists in 10 games. You average 2 points per game. He's been on that top line for the Battleford North Stars with Bell and Southgate, and they continue to impress and produce. And we talked about it on SJHL Weekly. One of, if not the best line in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. They continue to produce, and Holden Dole's a big part of the Battleford North Star success so far this season. SaskTel goalie of the month is Harmon Laser Hume, and he had a really solid month for the Flin Flon Bombers. A 2.36 goals against average, a .922 save percentage, mix in 2 shutouts, and you talk about an amazing addition for Mike Reagan and company in the Flin Flon Bombers. I'm going to talk to Rob Hart about it, but they go out and get Harmon prior to the start of the season, and he is fit like a glove in that lineup for Flin Flon.
Yeah, and maybe it was one of those trades at the beginning of the season that not a whole lot of people were like, yep, that's a game changer. That's going to set them over the top. But all he's done since the start of the season is give them a chance to win every single night. And on top of that, like you said, 2 shutouts this last month. He's putting the team on his back a couple of nights as well. So great performance by him. And you know what we always say about goalies, they usually have a good team in front of them, and Flin Flon overall has been playing great to help them out as well.
And they play very well defensively, and that leads into defenseman of the month, that being Reese Richmond of the Flin Flon Bombers. He had a goal and 9 assists. He really anchors that blue line for Flin Flon, and now that they have the addition of Alex von Sprecken, which they acquired from the Estevan Bruins, They have a very good back end up there in Flin, Flon, and Mike Reagan does such a good job of their coaching staff and their team. They play such a good system as well up in Flin, Flon, so that helps defensively as well. And then finally, Direct West Rookie of the Month was, there hasn't been many positives so far this year yet in Yorkton, just especially in the last couple of weeks with, they're currently on a 6-game losing streak. But one player that's really stepped up and is actually tied for points for them is Dylan Ruptash, and he had 7 goals and 3 assists in 10 games for the Yorkton Terriers this past month. And like I mentioned, he's tied in team scoring as a rookie. And, that says something when, Matt Hare and company obviously trust him, and he's had a great start to the season so far. But there's also been other players that, I'll say just to quickly, before we go into the final topic, Riley Ash easily could have been the Direct West Rookie of the Month. Josh Kotek easily could have been SaskTel Goalie of the Month. Tynan Ewert, Alex Blanchard easily could have been Defenseman of the Month. There was a lot of discussion when it comes to Players of the Month, as there always is, especially with Players of the Week. But there was definitely a lot of players deserving of Players of the Month, and we'll see who the Players of the Month are next month.
Yeah, stay tuned. But yeah, it was a really great month and a really fun discussion talking about that. Let's get into topic number 3 here, the hat trick, which of course we're going to take a look at the leading scores across the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. There has been some changes since the last time we spoke about this, Jer. And as we look at the top there, it starts at the top. Zach Kane from Melville, we saw him last night. He now leads the way.
Yeah, he does lead the way with 12 goals and 15 assists. He's been on a tear for the last 2 weeks in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. He was named SGU Player of the Week. But one of the things you kind of notice, obviously, when you look at this, we've talked about how successful Battleford has been this season. They have 4 players now in the top 10 when it comes to scoring. Flin Flon has 2 players in there. But then you see some diversity, obviously, with Zach Kane and Noah Wills. They're leading the charge for the Melville Millionaires. And then, of course, it's interesting, at number 9, you see McGuire Ratzlaff of the Nipawin Hawks. Yes, he's down in 9th when it comes to points, but he also has the most goals right now in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, so he's putting the puck in the back of the net. I also want to mention briefly before we take this stat board down, there's actually 3 players tied with 19 points, and the other 2 being Walker Jerome and Riley Morgan of the Larange Ice Wolves. So I guess what stands out for you on this board, Clark?
I think the meteoric rise of Zach Kane. I think last time we talked about the stat leaders, I think Zach Kane was he was in the top 10 if I'm not mistaken, but I want to say he was like down around 6 or 7, and he's been really stepping it up for Melville lately. And Noah Wills, who's also in this list.
Yes.
The 2 of them, we saw them last night. Like I said, dynamic duo for that team. And Melville's put together a few wins in the last little while, and Zach Kane is a big reason. He's been putting the puck in the net and helping others get it in the net as well. So that stands out to me as that meteoric rise of Zach Kane.
Yeah, and you know what? There's a lot of talented players in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, and we're going to see a lot of movement when it comes to the top 10 scores in the SJHL. But it had been a couple of weeks since the last time that we had taken a look at the top 10 scores, and as you can see, we've definitely seen some movement. All right, without further ado, it is time to bring on our guest. He is the legendary voice of the Flin Flon Bombers, Mr. Rob Hart. It looks like we've got it figured out, the technology figured out. Rob, how's it going today?
Good. Can you hear me over there?
I can hear you just fine. How's it going?
Perfect.
I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show today because I know you were in Melfort last night and you probably got in super late last night. First and foremost, I guess, how was last night's game?
Well, it was a 6 a.m. Return to Flin Flon. We made her through the freezing rain, the snow, and everything else. But great hockey game between 2 Sherwood Division rivals, and the Flin Flon Bombers found a way to get it done again. And you're talking about Harmon Laser-Hume earlier on. Boy, this guy was fantastic, especially late, as I'm sure you're aware that Cole Dupro received that 5-minute major penalty. It came with just 6 minutes remaining in the game. Flin Flon hanging on to a 2-1 lead, and actually just had a goal disallowed before that. Looked like they're going to jump up 3-1, but they ruled goaltender interference against Tremblay, so that goal was basically ruled off. And then they got the major penalty to Dupro, and Laser-Hume stood on his head. It looked calm, and Flin Flon picked up their 12th win of the year.
For sure. Before we get to Harman, because I want to talk about him, let's talk about the start of the season. You just kind of alluded to it. Bombers now 12-3, 1-1 on the year. They're near the top of the standings in the SJHL. What have you made of their start, and what has been a big reason to contribute to their success?
Well, I think there's a few different things. I mean, Laser Hume obviously has been very good. They didn't know what they were going to do after Cal Shell, of course, graduated, had a historic year, set the new franchise record for shutouts, and was basically got them within a goal of winning the Centennial Cup last spring. That was a big hole to fill. But, Flin Flon's playing some good defensive hockey. And Mike Reagan mentioned on our post-game report last night, might be the best defensive team he's had. They play a really good style in front of them. I mean, they're not scoring a ton. They're scoring more than they were. But defensively, it's just been a good collective unit. And obviously, Laser Hume with his numbers, goals against a 1.98 and a save percentage of 935 doesn't hurt either. But just defensively, and they don't take a lot of penalties. They're the least penalized team in the league. It was a tough one against Cole Dupro last night. Very uncharacteristic for a 5-minute major penalty for him. And before that, there was only like 3 minor penalties in the entire game. So Flin Flon doesn't take a lot of penalties. They don't hurt themselves, and just a really, really good defensively.
So it's interesting you brought up the scoring, because I remember at the beginning of the year, I talked to you in Nipawin at the Hawks home opener, and you had mentioned to me that you were wondering where the goals were going to come from. But it seems like the offense has kind of turned around, and the big reason why, I think, is the spark of Jacob Vockler coming back to the Flin Flon Bombers lineup. Maybe just talk about the impact he's made for the Bombers since his return.
Well, it's incredible. And you and I touched on this when I talked to you yesterday about, or whatever it was a couple of days ago. He's basically a point a game since he's been back. But even last night, he doesn't register a point, but he might have been the best forward on the ice. He's got the puck. He just creates so much. He's just dynamite hands. He can skate. He seems to read the ice really well. Just a total package. And I know that all the players are really excited to have him back. Ethan Ansey I was talking to yesterday, and we were mentioning just how things have turned around since he seems to have arrived back on the scene. But it's just what he does. He's just so creative. And even when he's not scoring, he has the puck a lot.
Right. For sure. And another player that the Bombers acquired, obviously, we know how Mike Reagan is active when it comes to improving his team, but acquiring Alex von Sprecken from the Estevan Bruins. Obviously, you guys saw him last year in the Centennial Cup, but to acquire a 20-year-old defenseman like him to come into your lineup, how has he impacted the Bombers defensively since making the trip from Estevan to Flin Flon?
Well, this guy, it's funny. He's, of course, a homegrown Estevan kid and played with the Bruins, but he almost seems like he fits the perfect mold of a Bomber. He's just so physical. He just he feeds off the energy of the crowd, and his teammates absolutely love this guy. He is just a machine, just the way that he prepares and goes about things. And like I said, it's almost a perfect fit. It's great to have him in Flin Flon, and of course, he got a good look at what the Bombers were all about with that Centennial Cup run last year. Of course, the league final, the great crowds in Flin Flon. I know he told me that he fell in love with the place, and he's really happy to be playing up north.
I want to quickly ask you just about last year's league's finals. Rob, you've been in around the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League for quite some time. What was the atmosphere like, and how could you potentially compare that to other atmospheres that you've been a part of in your time in the league?
Well, it's interesting because they went down 2-0 against North Battleford. Battleford's good this year, but they were good last year too.
Right.
And I remember saying this to somebody, go back to Whitney Forum for Game 3. I thought, because it just seemed like Flin Flon had lost a lot of games. I think they'd lost like 9 of their last 11 going in the playoffs. Just didn't really seem to have a lot of mojo going. And I honestly thought there'd be 400 or 500 people there for Game 3. Boy, was I wrong. There was, I think, about 1,600 or 1,700. The place was electric. Flin Flon fell down early in that game, but the crowd just really sparked them, and they never really looked back after that point. They won Game 3, went on to win the next 4, actually, and then, of course, upset Humboldt and then got into the finals against Estevan. But that Game 3 crowd reminded me of what Flin Flon was like in the 90s with some of the big runs that they had then, and maybe even the early 2000s around the Royal Bank Cup time. But the crowd was incredible, and it was really a big factor for these guys that really got where they – one of the big reasons why they're able to get that as far as they did.
I'll ask you this as the voice of the Bombers, but when it comes to the experience from last year, obviously getting to the league finals, heartbreaking loss in Game 7, and then playing in the Centennial Cup, for all those returning players, how valuable is that experience for this year?
Well, I think it's pretty valuable because Ethan Anstey again told me yesterday when the season was all said and done, Mike Corrigan said to his group, you can either go out and as champions or go out with your heads down because of the disappointing way it ended. I mean, they accomplished a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they weren't expected to get near as far as they did, but they had a lot of heart. And I think the one thing, they had such strong leadership last year. Zach Smith is one of the best captains I've ever experienced with this team. He taught these guys a lot. They learned a lot from him and some of the other veterans. Of course, we talked about Cal Shell, and, they brought in Gabriel Schipper, a big American kid last year who had some tremendous success. Those guys were more than just talented players. They were such good leaders. And I really think the guy, Jaden Mercier in particular, coming back this year, a lot of those guys really absorbed what it was like to get to that final.
For sure. I guess now, Rob, like I mentioned, you've been around the SJHL for quite some time. When you look at this season, though, the first month and a half, what stands out to you so far this year?
Just the commodity of the guys. I mean, I thought it was really strong last year. It seems like they got a really tight locker room. These guys really, really enjoy being around each other, and they just seem to find ways to get it done. And this team is built very similar to last year. They don't have to depend on like 2 or 3 guys to do scoring. I know that they do have a couple guys in the top 10, but you take a look at their lineup. I think they've got 7 or 8 guys in double figures in goals now. Like, they don't have to depend on 1 or 2 guys to score. They're happy when somebody else scores. It's just real strong leadership group again. And I just think it's a really tight group, and they play very well as a team.
For sure. Okay, here's a final question for you, Rob, and it's not Bombers related. It'll be more league related, but you've seen a lot of games already so far this season. You've seen a number of teams. Has there been any surprises through the first month and a half of the season from your perspective, or anything that's really jumped out at you that's been a little surprising?
Well, you know what, though? I actually will agree with the topic. I think Notre Dame is better than I thought. I mean, they beat Flin Flon on that Southern Road swing, and Flin Flon really had to fight to beat them here at home. They're a better team than I thought they were going to be. They lost, obviously, some really good players from last year, too. They've been a good surprise. I think they're stronger than what I was expecting. And, I mean, North Battleford, again, I knew they were going to be good. Did I know that they'd be without a regulation loss going into November? I don't know if I could have predicted that. And maybe Humboldt, losing both Perkins and McGrath this year. Maybe, I know they're going to be a good program. They always are. But those 2 teams, I think, have gone even a little bit of expectation. But they're certainly the top 2 teams in the league, and deservedly so. But a couple of things that have kind of caught my attention early on. For sure.
Has there, have you seen a team in your time in the league, go 17 games without a regulation loss off the top of your head?
Not that I could think of. I know that Nipawin back in the early 2000s, I think, ended the season with 5 or 6 regulation losses. Wow. So maybe they might have did it. But this is really something special going on, and they're so good everywhere, whether it's their goaltender, Cote. They got all kinds of scoring. I haven't seen them yet. Flin Flon goes there for a pair of games here, the 18th and 19th. I've got them circled on the calendar. That should be 2 big games. Of course, for the first meeting since the playoff, of course, matchup this past spring. So it's to wrap up the 3-game road trip too. So I'm looking forward to those 2 games. I want to see North Battleford. I knew they were going to be good, but wow, what a year they're having. It tough to win in the SJHL. The parity is second to none, as you know, and boy, they're making a nice run here to start, and the number 1 team in the country.
Yes, they are. But you know what? And the Flin Flon Bombers, you got the Bombers are right there with the North Stars near the top of the standings, and it's going to make for a great rest of the regular season, like you mentioned, with all the parity and all the top teams in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. Well, Rob, thanks so much for taking some time. I know you're a very busy man, but we really appreciate your time, and you're always welcome on the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you again, Jeromy. And boy, it's always great to talk hockey, isn't it? Especially in the SJHL.
It sure is, for sure. Thanks so much, Rob, and we'll chat with you soon.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on the show today.
That is the play-by-play voice of the Flin Flon Bombers, Rob Hart. We could talk to Rob all day. We could easily talk to Rob all day about his time in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. And, personally, I just want to say, Rob, when I first started in the league 10 years ago, was one of the first broadcasters I met, and he was so welcoming, was so helpful, and so knowledgeable about the SJHL. And I know I talked to him when I was up in Flin Flon, and I said to him, I was like, I don't mean to make you feel old, but do you remember 10 years ago, me and you up here in this booth together? And he was like, no. And I'm like, fair
That's
enough.
not a slight to you.
No, it's not a slight to me. And I'm like, that's fair. I'm like, that's fair.
Yeah.
But I always appreciate that. And I mean, appreciate him making the time to chat on. And we'll definitely, I stand by. I think we mentioned it the last time he was supposed to come on and we had the technical difficulties. I would love for him to just come on, just bring him on for a special and just talk about his time in the SJHL. And maybe that'll just be its own feature in itself.
Yeah, I hope so.
Tales from the Hart.
Well, he meant, yeah, jeez, that's perfect.
Trademark that. TM.
He's not just
TM.
a pretty face, you guys. But even like just him just mentioning, those 90s Bombers runs.
Unreal.
I want to hear about the 90s Bombers
Exactly.
runs now. Let's get them.
And we didn't even touch on the environment that is the Whitney Forum or anything like that. And
Yeah.
I just know I wanted to keep it to around 10 minutes. He's a very busy guy. When he's when I think Flon, I think Rob Hart.
He's right there, yeah.
He's right there.
Yeah,
and I think
right
Mike
there.
Reagan. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the two people I think of when
Yeah.
I think about Flon. But it's interesting. Obviously, we just talked to him about Flon coming off that big win last night over the Melfort Mustangs. And now, guess what? They've got a week off.
Yeah.
They don't play until next Thursday when they play host to the Yorkton Terriers for a pair of games. So
Doesn't hurt.
hopefully Rob gets some time off.
Yeah.
Some well-deserved time off.
Yeah.
And but with that being said, we have a kind of a busy week.
It's busy in the quantity sense, like in terms of games every night type deal.
It's we've seen a lot this year, the schedule wise. We've seen like 5 games on Friday and then 5 games on Saturday, so 10 games total. This next stretch of days, we have 9 games, but they're spread out, so it's not. You're not having a 5-game day.
Yeah.
But
the rinks are going to be busy all weekend. Yeah.
Yes. 3 teams playing 3 and 3. Well, one team just gets to stay at home. So let's start with tonight, Thursday night. Big one down in Estevan as the Humboldt Broncos take on the Estevan Bruins. Puck drop at 7 o'clock. It's the first meeting between these two clubs since the SJHL Showcase. And Clark, do you remember what happened at the SJHL Showcase between these two teams?
If I'm not mistaken, did Humboldt not beat up on Estevan? Or am I getting that backed up?
You're wrong.
I'm back.
You're mistaken.
I'm mistaken. I am mistaken.
No, this was the game that Estevan had a 4-3 lead with a minute and a half left. Humboldt tied it, and then with under a minute left, they scored the game-winning goal. They scored 2 goals in the span of 45 seconds or so.
Yes.
I could be wrong on the timing, but it was 2 goals in the final minute and a half to go from losing 4-3 to now winning 5-4 in regulation. So a bit of a heartbreaker for Estevan. So they'll be looking to get a little bit of revenge on the Humboldt Broncos. But then Friday will be much busier. We got 4 games on tap. The battle for North Stars kicking off 3-3 as they visit the Estevan Bruins, a big Sherwood Division matchup between the Laurent Ice Wolves and the Nipawin Hawks. The Weyburn Red Wings will play host to the Humboldt Broncos, and then the Yorkton Terriers will head to Wilcox to take on the Notre Dame Hounds, looking to try and snap their 6-game losing skid, and they'll definitely want some revenge after the last time those two teams played. They had a 4-2 lead going into the third period, and they ended up losing 6-5. On Saturday, just 3 games on the schedule. Humboldt will wrap up their 3-3 as they go back to Estevan to take on the Bruins. The Hawks will head to Melville for a meeting with the Millionaires. Melville looking to snap their 3-game losing streak. And then Battlefords will continue their trip in Weyburn to take on the Red Wings. And then a rare Sunday game, Clark.
Yes.
We were talking about, was
Sunday
that last
afternoon?
Was that last week we were talking about Sunday games?
It was last week or the week before. Yeah, it was recent. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we got a Sunday game as the Notre Dame Hounds will play host to the Battleford North Stars. Note the start time, 4:30 in the afternoon at the Duncan McNeil Arena. For you, when you look at those full 4 days of games, what stands out?
2 things for me.
Sure.
First off, we always talk about teams going on road trips where they play 3 games in 3 nights.
Right.
It's rare that you see a home team get 3 games in 3 nights.
Very rare.
So Estevan gets back-to-back-to-back home games. And I know that our good buddy Nick Saragella on Twitter the other day was joking that Estevan hadn't had a home game in a while. And now, hey, better buckle up, Estevan, because you got 3 coming this weekend.
See, here's the thing. It was only 2.5. Like, it was 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, it wasn't that long.
It just probably felt like that long.
Yeah, it felt
because
like
they played
long.
so many road games during that time.
They had
I
a big
get it,
stretch
but
there.
in the grand scheme of things, it was only 2.5.
But I don't
weeks.
know, like, if I've ever seen a time where you've had 3 straight home games. So that stands
Super
out
rare.
to me. Yeah,
Super rare.
Definitely stands out to me. And then the second thing, that Sunday game. I'm actually really curious about that Sunday game. We just saw Notre Dame in person, and they looked strong. And Battleford's is going to be coming off a back-to-back on that one.
Yeah.
And it's a afternoon game nonetheless.
Yeah.
So they'll be not only on the road, but dealing with an afternoon game on a back-to-back. So I'm curious. Maybe Notre Dame, if they can come out with that effort we saw from last night where they peppered the goalie on shots and they hemmed Melville in their end.
Right.
If they can bring that effort, is this going to be a game where maybe we see an upset over Battleford's?
Well, I mentioned this on the broadcast with Jamie last night. It's always interesting when you go to the Duncan McNeil Arena and you see a team play there for the first time that season and how they are able to adjust because for the fans that don't know, the Duncan McNeil Arena is the only rink in Saskatchewan that is Olympic-sized ice, and it does make a difference.
Oh, yeah.
It's different for the goalies. It's different for the players. I mean, you mentioned it to me during the first intermission last night when we were talking about the first period and Melville's power play. Their first power play of the game, it didn't look sharp.
Yeah.
And I think it was because of that extra space out on the ice, and they were too spaced out.
Right.
Right.
And the thing that happens when you get too spaced out is the passes you're normally making that are, controlled, maybe not the quickest passes. It takes a little extra second or so to get to the player.
Right.
And then all of a sudden everything just kind of breaks down, or it gives the other team, AKA Notre Dame, a chance to react as the penalty killers.
Right.
And they can set up their system a little bit better. So you have to change your game plan going into Notre Dame a little bit. And now that Notre Dame is getting some more home games, we talked about this as well.
Right.
They're practicing there, but playing games there and getting used to their game systems a little bit more at home. You talked about it lots. It's almost like a little home ice advantage.
Oh,
it's not
is.
almost. It is. Yeah,
It is.
So the more they play at home, the more they get comfortable with their systems on their ice, the stronger they'll get as well. And so that we're getting to that point now where they're getting closer and closer to 10 games at home, whereas everyone else has pretty much already gotten there. So let's watch out for Notre Dame.
But before they obviously have that game on Sunday against Battleford, they take on Yorkton on Friday.
Yeah.
And Yorkton is going to be wanting to snap that losing streak, especially after I think you've had a week off now. About a week off now since that loss to the Hounds last week, where they had a 4-2 lead going into the third period, and they kind of let that one slip away. They'll be coming out pretty energized trying to, snap that losing skid, but probably going back to the same rink where they suffered that tough loss. They'll probably be wanting to put their best foot forward on the ice on Friday.
Yeah, and also, it's going to be interesting to see. We've seen Dylan Ruptash win a couple of individual league awards lately. Is he going to want to come out and prove that, or maybe try to get some of his other teammates involved as well in those awards? We've seen Caleb Allen have really great stretches early on in the season. Will he regain that form as well? So I think Yorkton's a really interesting team to watch over the next little while.
Of course, we touched on it. There's 3 teams playing 3 games in 3 nights. We touched on Estevan playing 3 home games, which, like you mentioned, I don't know if I've ever seen that. I don't think I've ever seen that in junior hockey, whether it be
lots of times on the road.
Oh, on the road, 100%. That just happens.
Not,
At home, it's very rare. But Battleford's and Humboldt obviously playing 3 and 3. These are right now the top 2 teams in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. I think the interesting thing, when it comes to these 2 teams playing 3 and 3 on the road is we haven't had to see Battleford play much on the road this year. They pretty much spent the whole month of October at home.
Right.
Other than their final game of the month which was in Humboldt, which was that 3-2 overtime loss, which obviously, like, it was a great hockey game. It could have gone either way between the two teams, but I think Humboldt was definitely deserving of that win. But I kind of want to pay attention to Battleford this weekend because I want to see how they perform, away from the friendly confines of the ACC, and see how they perform in Estevan, Weyburn, and then, like you mentioned, playing 3-3 and playing in Notre Dame, because I feel like that last game in Wilcox is going to be very difficult, especially, like you mentioned, playing your third game in as many days, and then you're going onto a bigger ice surface.
Yeah.
Battleford skates well, but after playing 2 games the 2 days prior, it should be interesting to see how they match up on that trip.
And the depth, I think, is going to be important. And we
100%.
talked about both those teams you mentioned, Battleford's and Humboldt. Their depth has been huge for them all year long. It doesn't always have to be the same line all night, even though that Southgate, Bell, and Dole line has been so good. It doesn't have to be them every night.
Nope.
So that'll be tested over these next 3 days, but Humboldt as well. So I agree. Like, it's going to be a good test for us fans to kind of check them out on the road in a really adverse situation, 3-3. Every player will have to step up throughout that stretch.
Yeah, and the good news is, I think, for Humboldt and Battlefords and these 3 games and 3 night trips is, realistically, they're not that far away communities. Estevan to Weyburn's only about 40 minutes. Weyburn to Wilcox is only about 35. So it's nothing too crazy travel-wise once you've gotten you've made that initial trip. So traveling each day is not going to be too crazy for either of those teams. What about Larange and Nipawin? I think, Nipawin's coming off. They snapped their losing streak on Saturday with a shootout win over the Weyburn Red Wings, and the Larange Ice Wolves, obviously, they're coming off of 4 out of a possible 6 points last week. They're playing a rare road game during this stretch where they're playing 10 out of 11 at home. It's the lone road game for them until pretty much the end of the month of November. And they're looking to try and, kind of stay close to Flin Flon, because they're right now the one team that's kind of within striking distance within Flin Flon in the Sherwood division.
Yeah, same amount of games played between those two teams, 5 points difference. And we talked about Larange a little bit when we talked about those top players. They got guys kind of creeping on the edge of the top 10 there in Walker Jerome and Riley Morgan. And they've had so many guys step up throughout the year. They've had the goaltending. We talk about Dawson Smith a lot. Topher Chirico's won awards this year. They've had the goaltending this year. They've had a defenseman of the week just recently in Connor Abrick. So, they've had some of those big performances across the team. So I've always really appreciated how Larange has kind of put their season together.
Right.
And with Nipawin, like you said, it's going to be important for this team to take advantage of that home ice that while they can at the cage, and they need to put a couple wins together as well, because they don't want to fall too much farther back in that division either.
Right, and they just have the one game on the schedule this weekend, and then of course I think the interesting thing is with the 2 Highway 39 rivals, Estevan and Weyburn. You have home games that you want to take advantage of and get points of, and especially in that Viterra division right now, where I think it's still kind of right up for grabs for anybody right now, despite even Yorkton losing 6 straight. This division's really up for grabs right now. Estevan's obviously in the lead right now with a 10-10 record, but this club's also played the most games in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. They're going to tack on 3 more this weekend. But for those two teams, Estevan and Weyburn, you're taking on both Humboldt and Battlefords. I mean, how valuable is it going to be if they can get some points this weekend against 2 of the top teams in the SJHL?
Well, they need it. And you said you mentioned Yorkton. They have 5 games in hand on Estevan.
Yeah, that's the other thing, too.
5 games.
Is despite the 6-game losing streak.
Yeah.
That's why it's not out of the realm of being crazy to talk about, because Yorkton still has lots of games in hand, and they're going to make them up, and if they can turn a corner, they're going to be right back in the mix in that division. And
I think it's 4 teams as well that haven't been able to put a solid stretch together yet.
Estevan won 7 straight.
Sorry, my apologies to Estevan. Yes, they did go through that really great stretch. But they have a 500 record, and the other teams are just hovering around 400 in terms of that. So
sure, I'd agree with the other 3 teams.
Sure, there you go. That's what I'm kind of The goal differentials probably not where any of those teams want them to be in terms of plus minus. They're all in the negative. So what that leads to is exactly what you said. it's up in the air. The long ways to go, and every win for these teams, every game matters, especially for Yorkton right now. Again, they have to make up some ground games played wise. If they can put together out of that 5 games in hand, 3 or 4 wins, all of a sudden they're right back in there.
I know a couple weeks ago we were talking about the Viterra and the Sherwood, with those divisions being really up for grab for all 4 teams. But now we've seen a little bit of separation in the Sherwood division by both Flin, Flon, and even Larange kind of sneaking away just a little bit. But the Viterra division still, it's crazy to think about that we're a month and a half in the season, and really, when you look at it, it's up for grab for anybody. And really, if one team can put together one of those solid stretches and take advantage of those games, especially against it'll make the divisional games even more important. They can kind of separate themselves. But really, so far, a month and a half into this season, we really haven't seen much separation in that division.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's been some maybe missed opportunities by some of those teams, because remember too, Yorkton, like they started off really good. Like they were 4-0. What were they? They were 4-0 to start.
And I think the season.
6-2 at one point as well. 6-3 at one point. So before the losing streak they're currently on, where they were 6-3 for sure. But yeah, if we could see a good week here, a good week there, and that's all it takes. A good week. Maybe you play 3 games, maybe you play 4 games, and you get 8 or 9 points from those games. That can make a huge difference, and then maybe it sparks a run, like you said.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, we were talking about it on SJHL Weekly. It's crazy with that congestion in the standings right now in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, from about 5 to 12. Is if a team goes on a hot streak and plays really well for 2 weeks, you could see yourself go up, 5 or 6 spots in the standings easily.
Yeah.
However, on the flip side of that, you can see the exact opposite, which we've kind of seen with Yorkton, unfortunately for them, is they've lost 6 straight. And as a result, they've gone from being near the top of the middle of the pack to now being near the bottom of the SJHL standings.
Yeah.
So it's crazy with this parity in the league right now that you can get on a hot streak like that. The other thing that stands out to me, Clark, when it comes to that Viterra division is we haven't seen we've seen a bit, but nothing crazy, but we haven't seen too many divisional matchups between those teams. Right. I mean, obviously Estevan played Yorkton twice at the beginning of the season. Weyburn and Estevan had played a few times. They played 3 times. Melville and Yorkton twice or so, but those divisional matchups, when the division is this tight, are just going to mean so much more. And those are going to be the dates I think these teams circle on their calendar.
Well, I mean, anytime you go down the stretch, I mean, what are we at? We're at 20 games, like 15 to 20 games. I guess Kindersley's only played 14, but what is that now? Like over a third of the way-ish for Estevan, I guess. But, a quarter to a third of the way into the season already. And with so many divisional matchups probably left on the schedule, I'll have to do the research to see the exact number for each team. But those turn into, those 3 to 4 point nights. It's the 2 points here and not giving the other team 2 points that just makes such a huge difference
100%.
In the standings. And especially if we're going to see those in the last, let's say, month or 2 of the season, oh man, it's going to be a fun finish.
Well, those are 4-point games.
Exactly.
Right? Those are 4-point games.
Yeah.
So the divisional matchups are going to mean even much more, obviously, in the Viterra division. You did allude to Kindersley.
Yes.
And you know what? I just want to say.
What are they up to?
You know what? Proud Kindersley Clipper alumni here.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, a very interesting schedule this year.
Yeah.
We talked about earlier on in the year, they had an 11-day stretch off. Now they're having another 13-day off stretch, which is, I don't know. We talked about seeing a home team play 3-3. I don't know if I've ever seen a team get this big stretches like that off.
Yeah. And it's tough, especially when, their record, 4-7-0-3. Right. It's tough to get anything like the rhythm. So I would think,
just to build off that, because I was talking actually to Rob Hart about this a couple of days, or actually yesterday, on his broadcast. The interesting thing is with Kindersley is they have, in their last 3 games, they've gotten 5 out of 6 points. Yeah. They've gotten 5 out of 6 points. So you're looking to try and build some momentum, but then you have an 11-day stretch, or more than that now, 13-day stretch. Now, the last time Kindersley had that stretch off, after the stretch, they went up to Flin Flon and played 2 games, and they got shut out back-to-back games for nothing. So I'm curious to see how they're going to respond after this lengthy stretch off.
Yeah.
Because they're going to go on the road again next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, also to a very difficult place to play, that being the Mel Hagelin Uniplex in La Ronge.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well,
and the thing about it too is like it's not like this was like a randomly generated schedule too. Like they have these governor meetings in the summer where they make their own schedules, and I'm curious what went into it. I mean, maybe it was just a fluke. It might have just been a fluke.
It could be.
But you know, Ken Plaquin, maybe he wanted more games down the stretch and wanted to get on a heater going into the playoffs or something. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we can talk to Ken sometime and see if it was strategy, if it was coincidence, if it was a fluke. I'd love to hear.
Well,
about
the
it.
other thing too is it easily could also be rink availability.
Well, sure, but I mean, usually if
then you can play road games.
If you get kicked out, you go on a road trip or something.
Fair.
But I don't know. I'd love to talk to Ken about it.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely have to. We'll have to ask Ken about it for sure.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm actually really. Once they return to play next week, I'm going to be interested because you mentioned they've only played 14 games.
14
games.
14.
They're going to have some games in hand to make up. They're in a very being in the same division as Battleford and Humboldt, luckily for, teams like Kindersley and Notre Dame, the division structure doesn't matter as much nowadays. But they can make up those games in hand, and they can also get back right in the playoff race because, quite frankly, like they were playing those last 3 games, they were playing some really good hockey. And it's unfortunate that they haven't been able to take to the ice to kind of build off that in the last
I think we talked
stretch.
about it too. They have made a couple of acquisitions over the last I feel like over their last few games, but which stretches over a long period of time. But they have added some guys, and those guys made immediate impacts, if I'm not mistaken. Scoring a goal here, I'm pretty sure, was it Cox, I think, scored a goal in his first game with the Clippers, if I'm not mistaken. No. I'm pretty sure
it was in his first game back to the lineup.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's what So anyways, like they have added some guys, and I want to see them in the lineup. Let's get going.
Yeah. I mean, they're getting contributions from everybody up and down their lineup, which is good. And then obviously they got a good goaltending tandem with Falk and Jamin in between the pipes. So Kindersley, who's all got the weekend off? Kindersley, Flin Flon, and Melfort, I do believe, all have the weekend off. So no games in those communities. But like we mentioned, 9 games in total this from tonight, Thursday, all the way till Sunday afternoon. So lots of great hockey to check out at your local rink. If you cannot make it to your local rink to check out any of these games, you can, of course, catch all the games on Hockey TV. Get your subscription now. I do believe it's only $29.99 a month, and you get access to all the junior hockey games across the country, but you can tune in to all the SJHL action. It's great. I love it. You can I usually watch 2 or 3 games at a time.
Yeah. You can flip back and forth. You got it's
a good thing I live by myself, because I don't think I'd be able to watch 2 or 3 games.
Yeah. I have to
at a time.
I usually, when the kids are watching something else, I usually have my phone. I'm just kind of like looking down at the phone, watching the SJHL games on my phone. But
good life advice.
Yeah, just hide the phone nobody cares. Yeah,
there you go. So be sure to get your subscription on my to Hockey TV. I almost said my Hockey TV.
I got it into your head. I'm sorry about that.
That's what it used to be.
Yeah,
but it's Hockey TV now.
Yeah.
If you cannot catch the games on Hockey TV, we'll have you covered with all the highlights on social media. There they are. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is free to do so, and that's where we have our shows, both SJHL Weekly, SJHL Insider, all of our features, all of our highlights, all our partnership videos, and soon to be much more, as my road trips and travels are coming to a close tomorrow night.
Relief or sadness?
Both.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
I'd say both.
Yeah.
It's been a long month and a half of traveling, but it's been great to get out to the rinks and see everybody from all the different teams and all the 12 teams, and everybody has been so welcoming. And that's going to be I think it'd be a lot easier if I had some company on these road trips, to be honest with you, not doing these 7 to 8 hour drives by myself, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You probably missed some of those northern rinks, hey?
Yeah, you know what? Going back a ways, used to work for the SVM Bruins and used to go on all the road trips with the team and getting into those rinks and, like you said, just kind of seeing everybody and meeting some people, saying hi to some people.
Sure.
Usually you talk to people online, you never see them face to face, and then you run into them there. And I one day soon, maybe this season, we'll get up to a game up in the northern half of the province before too long. But those rinks, they all have something super cool about them too, which is
100%.
all of the rinks do.
100%.
But just in general, the northern rinks, they all have some really cool features, and it's fun to go to those places.
And that's why or myself, I guess, I've been making the SJHL road trip videos on social media, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about them. But one last stop, and that's tomorrow night. I will be in Weyburn to see the Weyburn Red Wings take on the Humboldt Broncos, rather. I got the two teams mixed up.
They're there another time.
I know. Well, Saturday. I got the games mixed up. I know it's either Battleford or Humboldt. I got them mixed up. Of course, all of our episodes of SJHL Insider and SJHL Weekly, which airs on Monday, wouldn't be possible without our great sponsors. Our podcast sponsor for our audio version is SGI. Thank you so much for all your support. But a lot of great sponsors go into helping produce our shows and helping us be able to, put on our shows to the degree and to the level that we want them to be. And that being Chevrolet, Capital Auto Mall, Great Western, Cantera Seeds, RBC, SaskTel, SGU, Direct West, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, Tourism Saskatchewan, and Young's Equipment. Thank you so much for all your support. We really, really do appreciate it, because we love talking about this league. We love covering this league, and it wouldn't be possible to put on these great shows without all the sponsors' support. Lots of great hockey to check out this weekend, so be sure to get out to your local rinks. 9 games on the schedule, and you can find all the information on scheduling at sjhl.ca. For Clark Munroe, my name's Jeromy Corrigan, and this has been another great episode of SJHL Insiders. Enjoy the games, everyone.